Welcome to the fifth tutorial in the Introduction to Programming Using Python series. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about code blocks, explain the if conditional statement, and look at building our first exercise, which will be a simple calculator. Before we get into conditional statements, we need to look at code blocks. A code block is a group of related code statements that execute as one as far as the other code is concerned. A code block allows us to build bigger building blocks, which we can then take and combine to build our programs. It is used for code reuse, such as defining functions and classes, which we will cover in due course. Python uses indentation, whitespace status to define blocks, as you can see in the diagram. Outer blocks can contain inner blocks which would be indented. A code block starts for logical reasons, such as defining a function, a class, or a conditional statement, which we will cover in the next slide. If at this point you're confused, don't worry, it will become more obvious with examples. Now we'll take a look at the Python if statement, which will also serve to illustrate the concept of code blocks. So far we've seen sequential statements. One executes after the other, sometimes using variables defined previously. But what if there is a statement that we only want to execute if a certain condition is met? For example, let's ask the user for his or her age and tell them if they're older than we are. From Python idle, let's create a new file by going File, New File, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control-N. In the new file, first of all, let's define my age for the purpose of the exercise. Let's say 15. Then let's ask the user to input his or her age, convert it to an int. And now what we want to say is if your age is more than my age. So this is the ifs keyword in Python. This is the conditional operator. Remember, this evaluates to true or false based on the two numbers on either side. And the if statement ends with a colon. Hit enter. Notice that the cursor is flashing and it has been indented because it starts a new code block, and this code block will execute only if this condition is true. So let's say print, you are older than me, click enter, and again, because it's a code block, which is many statements, it will still be indented at the same level, and all of these statements that are at the same level of indentation will execute if this condition is true until you break that code block by basically going back to the previous indentation. So if you click backspace, you can say print we are done to illustrate that if you break the block, it will go back to the previous indentation level and starts a new block. Okay, so now let's save that. Control S or File, Save File. Let's save it as your age. I already have the file, so it will say, do you want to replace it? Yes. Now let's run it. Keyboard shortcut F5 or run module. Let's enter something. It says you are older than me, and then we are done. Now let's run it again and enter something that is less than what we said is my age. It says we are done. So again, this illustrates that this code block, which has been indented under the if statement, will execute only if this condition holds true, but once we hit backspace and put more statements, those will execute either way. So just to show that we can have more statements, let's hit enter. Let's calculate our age difference. And let's tell the user what our age difference is. Remember string formatting. Control S to save, and let's run it again. So as you can see, it will execute all the statements that we list under the if code block, and also when it exits, the rest of the code will execute. One thing to notice when it comes to code blocks is empty lines do not break it. So let's go back to our file and show that. So basically here I've showed 3 statements in the if statement code block, and here I can have as many empty lines as I want, and they will not break this code block So we're still within the code block. The only thing that breaks it is when we hit backspace and enter a new statement that is at the previous indentation level. So again, to show that it still works, we'll hit Control S, we'll run it again, and as you can see, it still works fine. So we saw in the previous slide how we can use an if statement to execute conditional code. If your age is more than my age, I will do something. But what if I have several conditions relating to the same variable, and we only want one of those code blocks to execute? For example, let's say we want to ask the user for his or her age and tell them if they happen to be a child, teenager, young adult, or maybe older than that. Let's try that out in idle. Create a new file, do Control N, the keyboard shortcut, or File, New File. And in the new file, let's prompt the user for their input. Enter your age. Let's convert that to a string. And now we may be thinking, well, so what I really want to do is, if you're under 12, I'm going to say you're a child. If you're under 20, you're a teenager. Under 30, you're a young adult. And if you're over 30, you're something else. So let's say if age is less than 12, print you are a child. Backspace to exit that block. If age less than 20, you're a teenager. If age less than 30, you're a young adult. And if age more than or equal to 30. Now notice that the last one is not just more than 30, but is greater than or equal, because the previous one is less than. So if the user were to input 30, this would evaluate to false because 30 is not less than 30. And if the last one I said more than 30, then 30 would actually be completely skipped. So that's why this is greater than or equal to 30. Print you are ancient. Okay, now if you know a bit about programming, you'll know why this won't work, as in it won't do what we want it to do. But if you're completely new, this will make sense to you, because as a human, if you were to look at this, you look at it and say, well, yeah, this makes sense. If the user were to enter 15, I'm going to look at these and say, well, 15 is less than 20, therefore you're a teenager. And I'm going to know that this is the only one you wanted to execute. Python, however, will not. Now let's see what happens when the user enters 15. First of all, you have to save the file. So Control S, call it if age. I already have the file, so it says replace, yes. Now I'm going to run it. Let's say user enters 15. As you can see, the computer actually didn't know that you only wanted to say you're a teenager. It says you're a teenager and you're a young adult. Now the reason for that is we've actually put 4 different if statements, and each of them will execute regardless of what happened before and what happened after. So the way this works is Python will go over the first one, age is 15, so this is false, it'll skip it. Then it'll go to the second one, age is less than 20, so this is true, it'll print it. It'll go to the third one. See, it didn't know that you wanted to skip because you didn't tell it to. Age is also less than 30, so it'll print it. The fourth one evaluates to false, so it skips it. Now this is obviously not what we're looking for. What we want is if you happen to be 15, then only this statement would be executed. And there are 2 ways to do that. One of them is to have more than one condition in each if statement. We can combine multiple conditions for the if using logical operators. Previously, we've looked at arithmetic operators and other operators. We never got to look at logical operators, so let's do that now. Let's go to idle. Basically, logical operators allow you to combine conditions and get a result based on that. So for example, the 2 most widely used that we're going to deal with are and or. So if you have 2 conditions, you can say condition 1 and condition 2, and the result would be true only if condition 1 is true and condition 2 is true. And also there is the or operator. You can go condition 1 or condition 2, and the result would be true if either condition 1 or condition 2 are true. So I can do something like this. Condition 1 is true. Condition 2 is true. I misspelled condition 1, So let me define it again. Now I'm using true and false, but anything that is a conditional operator, like the less than, the equal, the greater sign, will give you true or false. So the logical operators would work like this. If I said condition 1 and condition 2, that evaluates the true because condition 1 and condition 2 are true. If I said condition 1 and condition 3, that's false because condition 1 is true, but condition 3 is false. And like we said for the AND, both sides have to be true. Condition 1 or condition 3 would be true because one of them is true. And if both conditions for the OR are false, then the result is false. So going back to our example, let's do that. So if age is less than 12, then you're a child. That's fine, that doesn't change. But just like we saw with the 15, if I were actually to enter 10, then it would say you're a child, you're a teenager, you're a young adult. So for the second if, I wanted to only look at ages that are greater than or equal to 12. Remember, this is less than, so it's basically 11 and below. So from 12 to 19, which is less than 20, I want it to go in here. So to do that, I changed my second if statement to if age is greater than or equal to 12. And remember, I want both. I want it to be 12 or older and less than 20. Then you're a teenager. I'll have to change the third one as well. So it will be age greater than or equal to 20 and less than 30. Print the third one. Control S to save that. Let's run. And it says you're a child correctly. Now, this is just one way to do things, and it works fine. The only problem is it will get complicated if you have a lot of conditions. Not only that, but these are still separate code blocks, and Python still executes each one regardless of what happens before. A better way is provided by Python using the if, elif, and else. So if in the if statement, you can tell it if something do this, else if do something else. So basically, if age is less than 12, print whatever, else if, which means if age is not less than 12, we'll try the other one. The keyword Python uses is elif, and let me show you how that works. So let's change our condition. We said if age is less than 12, that stays the same. The second one becomes elif. Remember, this is the Python keyword meaning else if. And now this means if age is less than 12, do this. Else, if age is basically not less than 12, but it's less than 20, now do this. We go over to the third if. We do it the same way. Elif, age is less than 30, and now it will only get to this statement if neither of these evaluate to true. Now the fourth one is a bit different because really we just want it as a catch-all to everything else that isn't covered in here. So we don't have to say elif, we can say else. Else. Now the else has to be the last thing. You can't have an else and then an elif. It has to be if, else if, and at the end you say else, which is the catch-all. And what it means is anything, any condition, any age that wasn't caught in the previous conditions, in the previous ifs, it will come in here. So if you're less than 12, you're a child. Else, if you're less than 20, you're a teenager. Else, if you're less than 30, and then else, for anything else, you're ancient. Let's save that and try it again. 17, and as you can see, it works. Now, one thing to note, because in the if-elif, Python would basically skip everything else after it found something that evaluates to true, the order of these conditions is very important. So let's have an example. Let's change our code to say if age is less than 20, you're a teenager. And if age is less than 12, you're a child, right? Now you can probably guess that this won't work because what happens is if the user enters any age less than 20, it will fall into this code block, execute, and then skip everything else. So if you were to enter 10, and let's run that, it now says you're a teenager. So this is a word of caution. The order of the if blocks is very important. So our first exercise in this tutorial series is to build a really simple calculator. I'd like you to create a new Python file, call it calc, and in the file write code to prompt the user for an operation. Say, ask the user what would you like to do, add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Then ask the user to enter the first number and the second number they wish to do. Convert the numbers to integers and calculate the result based on the operation the user entered and show it to them. So once you've coded the file and you run it, it should look something like this. It will prompt the user, what operation do you wish to execute, add, subtract, multiply, divide. The user would have to type out the operation they want. Then it'll say first number, second number, and it will show the user the result. One thing that I'd like you to do is if the user enters an operation that you do not recognize, let's say power, enter first number, second number, you have to catch that and say, sorry, I do not recognize this operation. I will provide a link in the description of this video to the solution to this exercise, but please try it on your own and please don't give up at the first snag you hit. Next time we'll start looking at lists, maps, loops, and more exercises. Until then.